it says I'm live. I honestly don't know. Because when I use OBS, sometimes there's a lag time of like half a minute. So if y'all hear a little bit of wailing at the beginning of this, it's fine. Everything's fine and I'm okay. I've got something super special for y'all planned today. And by something super special and by planned, I mean exactly this. We're just going to talk today. And I was going to use the P3P, the Oddcast thing that I made a while ago. And I was like, it doesn't feel appropriate to use that. And then I was like, oh, well, I can make another one or make a new one. I was like, oh, yeah, that don't feel appropriate either. So basically, I just wanted to come on and talk because I've been going through not a lot, honestly, but I've been going through my own journey, as we all have, especially within these past few months. And I feel like some of the most important to me things that I say I don't do on this channel. And at first that was intentionally. But I guess it's like I can do some of that over here. It's just that like when I start talking about it, it gets like really hot and dry, and it's like all the water just like retreats to the ocean, and basically the Saturn in my chart comes out. And also sometimes that Leo that's been locked up. But I don't know. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, because I just saw a part of a video that I watched a while ago, and I was like, well, and especially when like I'm scrolling down my little feed, and it comes to like a partial video or a video that I partially watched, then I was like, oh, I wonder like if there's a point in this video where it is sort of like where it's speaking to what I'm going through now, in some way, and it kind of was. And so for me, I've been blessed, honestly. I've been fortunate enough to meet a mirror of sorts, but also not in other ways. But for what that person has kind of sort of served as in my life here in the past few months, specifically, I mean, like all of 2020 has been, for me, like a continuation of one thing into another. And I was gonna come on here, or maybe I'll go on my other channel, and be like, "What exactly do y'all expect to happen? Like, y'all just think y'all gonna wake up one day and everything is different? Like, no? Question mark. Anyway, but I already talked about it over there when we were coming up on the solar eclipse. It was about portals and stuff like that, and about how like, preferably, you should be ready or try to get ready before a portal like that opens, so that you're not, I don't want to say wasting time, but so that you're not like cleaning up things you could have already cleaned up, doing things you could have already done, processing things that were already within your field to process, right? It's like, well, with this grand opening, you could have opened up yourself to more outside of what you were already kind of sort of dealing with, right? And then yesterday was the day at a time. And so I'm looking up Happy Mayan New Year, by the way. For those of y'all who follow the Syrian Star, Happy New Year. And it was like a few people were talking about the day at a time and what it means, and how like we're at this point where we can just like jump timelines and all this stuff, as if that's not something that we can do year round. And then I find this one video, and it's someone who follows a more traditional calendar and not the dream spell. And the dream spell is like the more contemporary, the more modern, kind of sort of the tropical astrology of the Mayan calendar, maybe. And this dude was just like basically calling it, I mean, when you follow your own system and there's another system that doesn't follow it necessarily, then it's like, if you have your disputes and your differences, you're gonna think a certain way, right? But he was like, that's Arguelles' toy, and all this other kind of stuff is very westernized. And he was like, a day at a time, that don't even make sense. And I was just like, ooh, girl, well, there goes, the few videos I was watching today. And I kind of wanted to go live yesterday, But I've been doing this thing that I've noticed I've picked up on for a few months now. But and like there's a whole thing that there's a lot of stuff I've been noticing about myself, right? So let's kind of start at the beginning. At the beginning, there it was like a one of the first things that I noticed was that there would be times when I wouldn't speak up, where I would hide and like shrink myself and like shirk away and like do whatever, and that was basically like my whole life. And honestly, like I don't necessarily feel the need to present myself hardly ever, um because that's just not really the type of person that I am. You know what I mean? Unless someone is like asking me for my opinion in a situation, well, there's a few things because like I feel like if people aren't going to listen anyway, then I typically don't say anything because number one, I'm not necessarily trying to explain myself, and number two, it's like if you're not going to get it, you're not going to get it, right? Or if it's not like if this is something that is currently outside of the realm of your understanding, or not necessarily understanding, but the realm of your comfort, right? Then it would be lost on deaf ears. And I'm not necessarily the type of person that likes to waste a lot. The only thing I like to waste is my own time, and I don't like for other people to waste my time or my energy. I never like wasting my energy and effort, especially because there are a million and one things I could be doing. And, if I'm doing something, it's not that I want to pay out, but it's like I've always got something better to be doing. Or at least that's what it was like in the past. It's like I'm not doing like 15 things that I could be doing right now. So, anyway, but I noticed that, like I said, I hide a lot and I don't really speak out. And that's where I was going with this. Like, it's been so interesting that I've met someone who isn't necessarily per se a mirror, even though the whole thing is interesting to me. Um, but it's like I met someone that I care enough about that a lot of the things that I force myself to do, I didn't want to enter the space of like even thinking about forcing that person to do it, right? And I'm pretty sure I've talked about that over here because that's something that I learned. Like, oh, it seems like a while ago, right? It was only a few months, but it seems like a while ago, and that was before I made my new channel and kind of sort of moved over there. Um, but yeah, like hiding. Like I would never ask that person to hide who they are, or I would never be like embarrassed or whatever. And then in my mind, it was just this kind of sort of rational connection of like, okay, well, like this person talks about is in the realm of works in blah 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 whatever around um things that are like a part of you in some way, but that you don't talk about. Things that you hide. Like there are some things that you hide that this other person doesn't necessarily hide, right? And then it would put me in that space of being like, oh, like do I like try to hide or do I not hide? And like I said, I never wanted to be in the position of asking that person to hide who they are. Because in my mind that's not right and I'm not that type of person. Like I don't do that. So then that led me to, like doing that within myself and like no longer hiding from me. And it was amazing and it was interesting. And also, like, some stuff was happening in the world and it pushed me into the spot of finally using my voice instead of being a little bit more. I mean, it's not like I'm extremely, extremely, extremely vocal, but it pushed me into the space of like vocalizing my opinions and my thoughts and my beliefs and my perspective more so than anything. And so, excuse me, then that was a whole nother part of what I've been going through. And it seems like that was like a few days ago, but at this point it was almost 2 months. And at the same time, I was having these dreams about like different YouTubers that was like weird. And then I feel like that's when like everything kind of sort of started to shift and go down. And when things got a little crazier outside, that's when I found myself at least a little dissatisfied. with some of the responses that I was seeing to everything that was happening and the approach. And it was like one of those things again where I was already learning how to use my voice anyway. Ever since what, November or December or whenever that World War III foolishness started happening, I've been in this space of being more conscious about the events that I want to happen in my reality and being conscious about the energy that I put into them, right? And so, thankfully for me, um, and like again, I'm not the type of person that defers my own judgment to somebody else. Like, I don't care who you are, how acclaimed you are, how smart you are, how much you know. I'm always going to think for myself because that's just who I am. I remember one time I got into a little conversation with my father about aliens, out of all things. And he was like, well, if Stephen Hawking, the smartest man on the planet, says that it's going to be like this, then I'm going to believe him because he's the smartest man on the planet. And I was like, I don't care who he is. I don't forfeit my right to think my own thoughts and have my own mind and do all that kind of stuff. And I don't. Like, it don't matter. But anyway, since then, it's been like I said, I've been consciously sort of fielding what I want to happen in my reality and what's just like not acceptable. And that was the things that was not acceptable. Now, it also comes with a certain element of understanding, and that's another thing that I've been learning since around the same time, maybe a little bit before. But it's like I feel like for me, once I came into a certain level of consciousness or awareness, and it's not necessarily that, but again, this is who I've always been, quite honestly. And I feel like that's one of the reasons. This is going to be all over the place if you didn't know. This is my Mercury and Pisces retrograde in the 12th house in action. So we just go with it. It's a series of tangents going down hallways. Eventually we get to the point, or we just completely bypass the point and we forget where we were going. But like I've always sort of had that connection, and I've never really limited it. And I've always like these are the types of conversations within me and within like my whole team or whatever that I've always had since I can consciously remember. And so for me, I guess it isn't necessarily about reestablishing that connection or attaining that connection or achieving it. It's like it's been this conversation, that's this dialogue that I've always had, right? But now I'm coming into a different space, a space where I kind of sort of actually show up in these conversations instead of just being like, well, why is this happening? And why is that happening? And why are people like this? And like, blah, 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 right? And I don't know. It's like the more I sort of do, the more I am my weird self, the more things kind of not make sense, but for sure the easier things are. Um, I feel like within the past few months, it seems like a lot of people have been getting rocked and have been confused, and like emotions have been all over the place. And for me, it's been a lot more subtle. And one of the reasons for that, again, is because I always have this constant dialogue going, first of all. And secondly, because since January 2019, I've been in the space of continuously doing the work. And whenever something comes up, I do my best to address it in that moment. And I don't really procrastinate or push anything back or hold it back. And so it's like when you're constantly renovating, when you're constantly evaluating and judging and analyzing your foundation, then you don't need these huge like critical failure type moments, right? I don't need that to look at things in my life. I don't need that to respond to situations or to look at how situations make me feel and, analyze my emotional responses and then ask myself if that's sort of rooted or tied to anything in the past that I'm already carrying, or is it like an actual legitimate in that moment emotion? You know what I mean? And they're all actual in that moment, legitimate emotions. They're all valid emotions, but sometimes it's about digging into it. And again, like, that's why it's my particular, or it's been my path where I don't have these multiple, like, dark nights that are just like my whole life is falling apart. Like I've had a few, and I don't need anything too extreme or drastic. But anyway, like I said, I'm all over the place. Using my voice was one of the other things. That one wasn't necessarily tied to this person. Um, just like really being seen is something that I've picked up along the way. And I don't know, like I didn't necessarily expect for me to be as me as I am right now. I don't know if other people did, but it's a lot, and it's kind of sort of in some ways who I've always been, but who I allowed myself to be conditioned to not be. And honestly, a lot of it came by means of like, oh, this is just what people do, right? It doesn't make sense, but it's what people do. People don't make sense, right? I don't understand why, if you're mad at one person, that then you'll go take it out on somebody completely different, but that's just what people do, right? I don't understand why people who are bullied then turn around and find other people to bully, but that's what people do. I don't understand why, instead of people working on the things that they need to work on within themselves, they'll sort of go so far deep into insecurity and jealousy that they will actually develop negative feelings and emotions towards somebody else when that person's done nothing to them, but that's what people do, right? And so again, it's things that I've learned, and I feel like it's not very, I don't want to say it's not me because but to say things like, why are people so like spiritually weak or blah 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 whatever, it doesn't, first of all, it doesn't benefit or help anybody. Second of all, I feel like it discredits their journeys to say it like that. And that's another thing that I never want to do, because right, like we all start at different points and we all have different paths. And I'm a person who has a very specific and slightly unique path, where there's a lot on my path that I don't get from outside of myself. And I've never completely aligned with a single person or a single system, right? It's like I've always been the type of person to take bits and pieces and then to fill in the gaps within myself. And then to challenge what I'm getting within myself and being like, is that work for me? Does that sound like it makes sense to me? Or is that just what people do? Right? It's like, does that make sense, or is that just what people do? Um, and I've always been that type of person, right? I remember being a kid, sitting outside McDonald's on the way home for whatever reason. And I looked at my mom and I was like, I don't understand why people get upset by your mama jokes, because if it's not true, it's not true. Why are you mad? And if it's true, it's true. Why are you mad? Right? Either it's not true and it makes like no sense to be upset by something that's not true, or it is true and like you already know. So either way, like, why are you mad? But again, I've always been this type of person. Um, and I know this is all over the place, but it kind of sort of, there's that, I was literally looking for that cup the other day, and I knew it was up there. I promise that cup phases in and out of reality. Because sometimes I look up there and I'm looking for that cup and I don't see it. And it's literally right there. I don't know. Anyway. Um, where was I going with that? Yeah, it's like I have to be more understanding. And I've been trying to surgically remove the stick from my, area, because she was shoved up there, kind of, sort of like, kind of really, like, really up there. And I saw something one day, and I genuinely, it happened a few times, honestly, not gonna lie, like twice, and I was just like upset, and then I was like, the first time I didn't necessarily catch it, but it hit me later. But the last time it was almost immediate, and it was like, wow. For me, it was just like, wow, that like I really do got a stick up there, don't I? Type of realization where it's like, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like my mother's son. Anyway, So back to the things. That one of the things was hiding, for sure. I didn't want to hide anymore because I would never ask anyone else to hide, regardless of who they are to me, unless they're like not a decent person. But if they weren't a decent person, I probably wouldn't be like friends with them, honestly. Um, or I wouldn't be engaging with them in situations where stuff like that happens. Because I had one friend who was kind of terrible, and like that was his sense of humor. And people with senses of humor like that, like it's just not my sense of humor. So I don't laugh, I don't like it, and I don't like to be around it. Right? It's like people who purposefully tell offensive jokes and stuff like that. I'm like, that's not my cup of tea. It never has been, and it probably will never be. And I will gladly keep the stick where it is for those situations. But in other situations, it's like, I do need to learn how to lighten up and not be so Saturnian all the time. Like I ain't got Jupiter in my chart, right? But I got two Capricorn placements and one Aquarius placement, and the Aquarius placement is my Saturn, and I'm pretty sure it's in my 11th house, which is the Aquarius house, so one of Saturn's houses. And then I got like two Pisces placements and a node in Sagittarius, my North node in Sagittarius. So Saturn kind of sort of rules out in my chart, honestly. Um, but anyway, where am I going with this? I think most of what I wanted to say, yeah, lately. Okay. So lately for me, one of the biggest and hardest things for me to wrap my head around, not wrap my head around because I understand it, but I think I still need to get to the root of why it affects me as much is like, I feel like, oh, okay, well, it's making sense as I think about it. Um, so I've always been the type of person before, 2019. I was the type of person to distract myself from my own problems with other people's problems. And I played this interesting dynamic of like wanting to have actual genuine friends that I could talk to and have a sort of diversity of experiences with, right? Not be a single dynamic. And also like being there as a support system to help. Now there were some people who would just like take and always needed help and never really gave me anything in return. And for those people, I was like, no, this ain't, no, that's not quite what I'm looking for, you know? But anyway, like I would always distract myself with other people. And again, that's why, like yesterday, for the past maybe 2 to 3 weeks, I've been feeling like, well, no, I'll say for the past like week to 2 weeks, I've been feeling a like take care of yourself type of energy and like a don't be so quick to always like in those moments where there isn't anything to fix or to give advice on or to be present for, right? It's like don't always go looking for it and just like use this time like to relax, enjoy yourself. And I've been back here and I'm like I don't even know what I enjoy anymore. Like video games, for me, honestly, like they were always a distraction for me. But now that I've sort of worked through all of the stuff that I was distracting myself from, it's like I don't really need the distraction. Um, and then it's like anime, I haven't really watched in a while. Other shows I don't really watch. All I do is like watch videos on YouTube now, and it's like primarily quote unquote spiritual ish content, and like that's perfectly fine. But it's like, what do I even do for fun anymore? And I'm like, I don't even know. Then my brother's been asleep in the mornings, and I'm like, okay, well, Can't even like play games with him or something. He wake up when it's time for me to go to bed. But yeah, that's the feeling I've been feeling, and I've really noticed that. And then also too, it's like just feeling into the space that someone else is in, and especially some of the content creators, because like and again, it's another one of those, we're humans, we're full of contradictions and paradoxes. um but it's like, yeah, I understand that, like, you're going through your own whatever, but where's the content, sis? Like, what about the rest of the people going through stuff who sort of look up to you and who need you as some sort of guidance? Like, right, if you set yourself up to be that in the world, then shouldn't you be that in the world when the world needs you to be that? And again, it's not, I mean, honestly, it kind of sort of is a place of judgment, but at the same time, it, I don't want to say it's not. So for me, what it is, it's a combination of platform, presence, what someone preaches, and like their power, I guess. Lots of P's. Um, and when I say their platform, it's like, if you are in a certain realm, let's say self help or spiritual or religious or anything kind of sort of in the role, in like a therapeutic role, right? A soother. When you're a soother or a healer or whatever, then like it's like, I don't know, if the world was falling apart, like if all the doctors, for lack of a better example right now, if all the doctors were like, you know what, I'm on vacation, or, I got a family too and I'm not trying to whatever, like, if everybody quit because they were more concerned with themselves, then we'd have no one in the healthcare field taking care of people right now. And then where would we be? And I was like, I don't know. For some people, it's like, well, be thankful that Patrick ain't your doctor, because I don't know if Patrick would have. I don't know if Patrick would have too much been. Yeah, I don't think I would have necessarily been that great in these times, because I'm like, especially for people who like don't follow certain protocols and then find themselves in whatever situation, and regardless of the pan or the plan or the scam or whatever, it's like you didn't think this was real, and now you're sort of in need of whatever. If the stories are true, I don't feel like it's my job to do whatever. I don't, because you made your choice. You made the choice to disregard everything and to pretend like everything was business as usual. And so when you find out it isn't, I don't personally feel any responsibility to help you. And I'd rather give this very limited space nowadays to someone where that isn't the case, right? Like someone who was following protocols and procedures and still ended up getting it or whatever. Like, that's who I would rather give a bed to, that care to, rather than somebody who was like, oh, I'm just going to go to this multi-thousand person party and live it up. It's like, girl. And I don't know, to me it just speaks of a certain entitlement that I'm not a fan of. So, if Patrick was every doctor, then the world would have no doctors right now. Well, no, I'll take that back, because, like I said, like, there are some people where I'd be like, okay, cool, but for other people, I'd be like, no, like, you made your choice, so choices come with consequences, and I think that's another big thing. Or for me, it's been highlighted as a big thing, maybe since the February or March. I think it was since March, because I remember I was still doing like the Deccan readings or the season readings. And for some of them, I was like, things look this way or things look that way. But right now, the most important thing is choice. And I feel like, choices should be honored. I feel like a lot of people make choices and they don't want to face the repercussions or the consequences of those choices. And I feel like if we are to hold each other as esteemed beings, with free will and sovereignty and consciousness in our right, just like we have a right to choices, I think we also, a right to choice demands consequence. Because otherwise, it's like, how do you learn to make better choices? How do you grow? How do you rise? For a lot of people in this country, as we found out, they don't. You know, there are quite a few in around the world, not just this country, but consequence is something that certain people and some people have been able to avoid for quite a while. And whenever they enter the space of facing an actual consequence, it becomes this whole like real life moment. But in a world where free will is a thing, where people have choice, consequence should be like an accepted part of that reality. And now maybe we're starting to see some of the blowback of not having that consequence. We're starting to see some of the blowback of choices that it's like, it's hard to describe, but it's choice with no consequence. Like when you think you're going to get away with it, you're going to do all kinds of things, right? And there's a whole other narrative of people who've been getting away with a lot of stuff for quite a while, who were otherwise untouchable, who weren't even like necessarily operating in the shadows, right? It may not necessarily have been like super common knowledge, but it's like these industry open secrets, right? Now it's like some of that we're sort of correcting and we're coming for. Actually, there's a lot of that going around. And that's another thing about choice without consequence, because eventually the scales are going to tip. And if we're talking about karma, people can rack up a lot of bad karma in the absence of consequence. Because then you get bold. You don't care, right? You go cold and your heart's just a vestigial structure, right? It's like we put him on the table and it's like, well, we have this organ here and it's linked to this emotional, spiritual, whatever conscious sort of construct. But in this particular specimen, it doesn't appear to do anything. It's like, whoa, what? It's like, yeah. It's like just how you can live without a spleen, apparently people can live without a heart too, you know? And some folks will say some people can live without a brain. See, this is where I try not to go, guys. I try to be nice. I gotta have Virgo in my chart somewhere. Now I'm getting shady. Okay, I didn't have to throw shade at the Virgos. Um, but yeah. Anyway, back to the original point. Um, I find myself, and that was the presence or whatever. Now with the platform, it's just like the number of people that you have, honestly, and especially in influencer culture. And let's bypass the whole conversation of how and why people are so easily influenced by other people anyway, right? To the point where literally anybody could go viral on YouTube and get YouTube famous. Literally anybody of any kind of sort of moral, ethical, characterial background. And then here they have this huge platform. And we've seen quite a few people with these platforms that are just as human as everybody else, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on the circumstance. And then they kind of sort of do a fair amount of damage to some people. And it's like, it's kind of sort of become its own little mini Hollywood in a way, where apparently like YouTubers have dirt on each other, and it's it's like the circus outside the circus, right? It's like the Ringling Brothers had these like neighbors that they would always compete against, and now we're seeing the neighbors sort of open up their circus. Um, but yeah, with the power of platform and with being an influencer, it's like you kind of sort of have a certain responsibility, and at the very least, and again, this is all like what I personally think and whatever. And I can be quite critical, honestly, especially when it comes to certain things. Like when it comes to a lot of things, I'm non-judgmental, and I don't think I think there's honestly a difference between being critical and being judgmental. I can be very critical, but not necessarily judgmental, because again, every choice and every decision that we make comes with a history of previous choices and decisions, comes with emotional history as well as mental history, and that's not even accounting for the just the overall journey of self growth and evolution that we go through either. It's a many factored sort of approach that I try to take to a lot of things. But again, like my not kind of sort of problem or issue is, but it's like when we come upon these pivotal moments where it's so important for people to really do, and again, it's like when you speak to a general audience, right? Not everyone has the same path and not everyone is at the same point along their path. But it's like the words that you say in times like this, like that holds weight and it matters, right? Because like, and I try to be careful on how I speak of these things, because again, I'm conscious of. I try to be more. I am more conscious of what I put out into the universe and how my conscious and subconscious beliefs help sort of fuel the systems that are already running, um, and the ones that are yet to have begun or whatever. But it's like, let's say that all of a sudden we find out that things are like really real, right? And I'm also the type of person to always err on the side of caution. And so it's like, let's say we find out that things are like actually real, and it's like you've been using your platform to delegitimize blah 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 whatever, and now because of the voice that you've had, you accrue karma because of the people listening to you, right? Whenever you're a shepherd of any kind, you take responsibility over your flock, and it's a responsibility from what you say, more so I think than sort of like what happens, right? Because like if people don't listen to you, then people aren't going to listen to you, and I don't think that's on you necessarily, especially depending on the context. But if people are listening to you and you're telling people to do something that they maybe shouldn't be doing because of the information that you have available to you at the time, like again in my mind it's like you hold some sort of responsibility for that, and you may have to pay for that. I don't know, maybe not. It's like you break, you buy, right? um and then that was platform presence. I don't remember the other piece, but that's basically it. It's like you're an influencer and you're influencing people in this time that's whatever, like shouldn't. I don't. And again, in my mind, it's like there's also been this like a few times some people will use the astrology to be like, oh, we're gonna go through this again. We're gonna go through this again because of this retrograde and that retrograde, and the last time we went through this and stuff like this happened, and so we knew it was gonna happen. And it's like you knew a pandemic was gonna happen. You can't necessarily do anything to prepare for that, sure. But the other things that are happening, it's like for some people, or it's like the way that some people talk about some of these things sometimes, it's like there's no agency in it. It's like just sit down and wait for it to be over, or like wait until this time to do something, when in reality I feel like we should always be in a space of preparation, right? And one of the most eye-opening things for me personally that I already talked about on the other channel, it was the whole Mars and Pisces thing. I feel like I heard so many people say that, like Mars and Pisces is lost. Mars and Pisces is like it's misguided. Nothing that it does work. Blah 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 whatever. And then I was uploading the pictures to my Instagram one day, and the Ten of Cups popped out, and it's literally Mars and Pisces. So especially when Mars is in the last decan of Pisces, that's the decan of Pisces that Mars actually rules. It's the Ten of Cups. You're telling me Mars and Pisces is like linked and correlated to the Ten of Cups, and we're supposed to wait until Mars goes into Aries when we have like this Ten of Cups energy like right here. Mars and Pisces is the one time where Pisces will actually do something like IRL, like in real life. Mars and Pisces is the one time when Pisces will actually move instead of just dreaming and thinking about it, right? instead of coming up with these elaborate fantasies and visions of what the future is going to be and like what happiness looks like and all that. Like Mars and Pisces is when like there's an energy that's like, okay, Pisces, go out there and make it happen, right? Make your dreams a reality. That's Mars and Pisces, to me at least. And even when it was directly squaring what, the full moon in Sagittarius, then it was squaring the nodes, and it's like this is the energy that we need to actually like, in my mind, like Mars and Pisces, when it was doing that, it was literally a portal to the timeline that we wanted, to our best life, to everything that our hearts could desire. And people are like, oh yeah, it's lost, so don't do anything, wait until it goes into Aries. And then another thing that I've been noticing, and it kind of blows my mind that I'm only noticing it now because it's literally life, everything is cyclic. Everything affects everything. It all flows and it all moves, right? When water is flowing down a channel, it doesn't start at the top of the channel and then disappear and then reappear at the bottom of the channel. It's like, no, it's this constant flow, it's this constant movement. And so now that Mars is coming into Aries, like, what is it actually going to do, right? It's like Mars and Pisces is when you give Mars the dream. It's when you give Mars the directive, when you give Mars the orders, when you tell Mars, okay, Mars, like this is what you're fighting for. This is what you're going to accomplish. And it's like you're giving Mars the dream so that when Mars goes into Aries, it's fully fired up and ready to go. But again, it seems like there are so many like separate and disparate, just like at this moment everything is open to you. And boom, now it's gone. And it's like just like if you're going somewhere, right, and if I open a door, right, you still got to walk to the door, and you have to walk through the door, and then you have to continue walking. It's not like I open the door and then you just magically appear right in front of the door, right? It's a flow, it's fluid, it's moving. What are you doing, what are we doing to actually move to the spots that we want to be in? And people are like, oh, the energy for 2021, the energy for the later half of whatever. It's like the astrological energy is going to change and it's going to be beautiful. And it's like, okay, but like, what are we doing to get there? What are we doing to make it happen? Because if you just wait until it's there, it's like, if you never do anything, nothing ever happens. It doesn't matter what stars are in the sky and where they are. You know how many opportunities and how many miracles and how many breakthrough moments that people have every single day that they pass up? In my mind, it just like, it blew my mind. Because I'm like, I was honestly, I was kind of sort of heated on, for many reasons, on multiple levels. Because I'm like, Mars and Pisces is literally the Ten of Cups. And I've never heard, and again, I only watched a few people that I kind of sort of stopped watching because that's how just like over it I was. But I was like, I haven't heard anybody talk about the Ten of Cups or that energy when it comes to Mars and Pisces, especially from the like the 20th to the 29th degree. It's the third decan of Pisces that Mars is the ruler of. Instead, it was like, oh, Mars is entering the final degrees of Pisces, so it's extra lost, right? And like Neptune was literally right there. Like, and that's another thing. I feel like so many times we default to the worst aspects or the lesser aspects of these planets. Where instead of like, oh, Neptune is really playing a trick on Mars right now, and Neptune is like putting out these illusions. And in my mind, I guess from my perspective, it's like, I feel like there's so much lifting and clarity and light coming to so much right now. I don't, in my mind, it doesn't necessarily register as illusion. But at the same time, it's kind of sort of like when you're so deep into the system that when you see the truth, it looks like an illusion, right? It's like if all of a sudden we find out that for whatever reason there's been something that they've been putting into the ozone, right? That into the atmosphere that changes the sunlight that comes down. And so it's like we're made aware of it, and then they're like, okay, we're going to stop doing this. And then all of a sudden the sky isn't blue anymore. It's like purple or whatever, right? Then you'd be like, oh my gosh, like it's an illusion because the sky is supposed to be blue. The grass is supposed to be green. And that's one of the things, one of the trickier things about sort of breaking out of illusions and programs is that if you've never seen anything outside of it, who's to say what's real, right? And that kind of sort of took a whole whatever that I didn't necessarily want to take. And then I'm not even going to talk about like everything with this, with it's just like I don't know. Like I said, for me in particular, I've been more consciously involved in my own way, and we all have our own ways of doing things. But I've been more consciously involved in my own reality since November. I think it was November when all that World War III stuff came out. And then it was about the same time when I was like, it's not fair that we're supposed to have free will and free choice down here, but it seems like so much of the world reads that it's hard to have moral or ethical integrity and succeed at the same time. It seems that like you have to compromise something in order to get ahead in life, and like that's not fair. That's not actual free will if you are sort of like promoting one approach as more successful than the other approach. And like at the end of the day, it is because it's always a choice. No matter how good it looks, it's a choice. I was like, okay, well, fine, whatever. But I don't know. As I've been doing that, then my understanding of everything has kind of sort of been shifting and evolving and changing as well. And again, I guess like if everyone were here or there in that point, then we wouldn't be in this space of transition. Like we'd already be there. But I feel like it does. I feel like people do themselves. What the? Oh, snap. My battery is running low. Oh, I didn't even notice that the thing. Girl. Well, she right here. Let's try to plug her up before my computer just die on me. Oh, yeah. I unplugged it last night. How did you have this much battery? If this thing dies, there we go. Goodness. Struggling for like 45 seconds just trying to put the thing in. This thing will die fast too. Um, like we'd already be there. And I feel like sometimes we do ourselves a disservice when we don't try to look at both sides of the equation. I feel like we've gotten so used to and so accustomed to looking at one side of the equation and figuring out what to do, right? It's like, well, how am I being manipulated? How am I being deceived? What is like that devil energy kind of sort of want me to do in this time and in this space? And let me do the opposite of that because then that's the right thing to do, quote unquote. That's the higher aligned thing to do because devil energy is inherently lower energy. But I feel like we don't necessarily always ask ourselves, like, what would the other side want us to do, right? What would that higher aligned energy want? What would that light energy want us to do in this situation and in this time? And it's kind of sort of a step beyond. And like I've talked about it briefly when I did all the generals or whatever. But at the same time, it's like it's interesting that it feels like when everything went down. And again, I'm an observer. I watch things. That's how I operate. Right? I don't necessarily or in the past I didn't necessarily always speak, but I'm always observing and I'm always watching and I'm always analyzing and critiquing and doing all kinds of stuff. And that's part of who I am and part of why I get some of the perspective that I get. Um, but it's like if you kind of sort of look at it when everything kind of started to go down at the end of May, it was like, in my mind, from my perspective, and again, I am black, I'm African American in the United States of America, so I can understand that I have a unique perspective in this because for me, it isn't necessarily like for me, it's like real life, right? It's like my lived experiences, and not everything. Again, I'm not going to claim everything because fortunately enough for me, I don't have some of the worst stuff to claim. And even when I do, because there have been moments, it's like I kind of sort of forget about them, right? Because, like, I've literally been spat on IRL before. Wasn't a fan of that. I literally had one friend that told me that his mom said that he couldn't, like, play with us anymore because we were black. Like, literally. Um, and, like, I've had other experiences. So, but it's like, sometimes I gotta find them, interestingly enough. But anyway, like when all of that first started happening, even when like with the masks and with social distancing and everything since the lockdowns, and this to me is the most interesting part of what's happening right now. What I'm primarily focused on, because like the people who won't necessarily call themselves conscious or awakened or whatever, I don't want to say they're outside of my jurisdiction or outside of my purview, but I don't necessarily care about them as much. Because again, it's like, if someone claims to be adult, and if someone claims to be an adult, and if someone claims to have certain responsibilities, then you look at them as if they're like, are you actually responsible? It's the same thing for like I grew up around Christianity, and people be like, oh well, because I'm a Christian, then like people judge me like harsher than other people. And it was like, girl, well, if you take a judgmental point of view, if you have a holier than thou attitude, then I feel like, yeah, people are going to judge you, and people are going to see if you're actually living what you sort of preach and believe in, or if you're just using your beliefs conveniently to sort of like, navigate certain situations and justify certain points of view that you already have, regardless of the everything else. Um, so, in my own personal mind, I don't think it's unfair, right? Just like if someone's like, "Oh, I got my PhD and I'm a doctor," like you still ask your doctor questions. Some of y'all, right? Your doctor who done went to school and who is medically trained, and not all doctors actually listen. Not all doctors are good doctors, but again, it's like we still ask these questions anyway. Some of these people you ask even more because that's the position that you take. So, like I said, I'm just looking at more so only care about the people who are more sort of like claim to be more awake or more conscious or whatever. But again, in my mind, it's interesting that when all of this like pandemic stuff happened, and then you get the people who sort of protest like having to wear the masks and the curfews that were enforced because of that and whatever. But then like immediately after that, or not too long after that, here we have this same situation that we've had in the past. But you see like how quickly their argument shifts back to what it used to be when it no longer serves them, some people. And again, in the light community, if you kind of sort of look at it, when the world, and specifically America, because this is, all I know, even though, all over the place where they have indigenous and aboriginal people, it's like the indigenous and the aboriginal people always have it worse. So, not necessarily that black people are indigenous to America, but, we still treat our indigenous and native people all kinds of ways. Like how they catching cases in that community, girl, and ain't nobody talking about it. I don't know if it's necessarily true or not, but somebody said that they asked for like supplies or something and they were sent body bags. Like, but again, anyway, back to my original point, if you kind of sort of look at it, maybe you'll be able to see it too. I don't know why I'm popping these icebreakers. These icebreaker sours are so good. I don't even want the mint ones anymore. But if you look at it, when the collective, when Gaia needed light the most, a lot of people retreated. A lot of lights went dark in those days. And it's like, if you're so unity consciousness and you're so 5D, you're so service to others or whatever, like you would think that wouldn't happen? Question mark. So I don't know, maybe there's a timeline on Earth where the world went dark and the light workers actually stood up for something, right? And we were able to come through this, I don't know, a little quicker or something. But it's like so many people went dark. And a lot of people who were seemingly otherwise service to others and unity consciousness and 5D and all this other stuff. Now all of a sudden it's like, I don't want to be inconvenienced for somebody else, right? When it comes to wearing masks. This is a hoax. That's fake. That's false. You're giving away your power. You're giving away your freedoms. And it's like, and the part of it that blows my mind the most is that, like, it's the mask. Because in my mind, like, the mask is the easiest thing that people can do, the least inconvenient for some people. Again, there are some people who legitimately can't wear them because of medical conditions and otherwise. But for the rest of y'all, for the rest of us, it's like, really, we're so high vibe, we're so high consciousness, but we can't minorly inconvenience ourselves for the good of the collective at this time and point. And if I were evaluating the light side, that's what I would be looking at right now. It's like we're asking you to wear a cloth. 55, 55 on the clock. Hey! We're asking you to wear like a piece of cloth in front of your face right now. And that's the limit of your compassion for other people. That's the limit of your caring for your fellow man on this planet. And you're supposed to, and that's why in my mind, I immediately go to, like, this is supposed, like, this is the brightest. These are the brightest of lights in these times right now. People who can't even be bothered enough to think about somebody outside of themselves. Because, like, there's already enough of that on, like, the other side, on the quote-unquote, like, sleep or unwoke or whatever side. Like, there's enough of that self-serving energy. Like, I don't want to be bothered or inconvenienced for anybody else. I don't really care type of energy. So it's just interesting how it seems like so many kind of sort of fell into that camp as well. And again, I feel like in the beginning it was a lot of like the fear programming and the fear mongering and everything else, where people were like, I'm not going to buy into this, I'm going to do the opposite, which was fine, but let's not stop thinking, right? There are multiple sections to a test sometimes, many phases, and the questions sometimes increase in difficulty. And we're not necessarily out of it yet. So, right? Like, what's up with this one size fits all approach? And I don't know, it's just, in my mind, it's just like, and that's why on my new channel, I was like, it seems like there are some stars in the world, and then there are satellites. Everything that we see in our solar system is a satellite of the sun. The only luminous body in our solar system is the sun. So if you see Venus in the sky, if you see Jupiter and Saturn and Mars and whatever else, know that they're just like moons. They don't have a light of their own. They're shining sunlight back at us, and that's why we see them. There's only one star in the solar system, and it's the sun. And it's like, it was just made so apparent to me, because like, it's like when the world went dark, so many people who were otherwise light or were of light went dark as well. And again, we all have our own personal things that were going on, and we're all going through our own tower moments, and the veil's been lifting, and people have been facing their reality and doing all kinds of stuff, and life keeps happening, and then it's like the lockdown was whatever, and it was a lot for some people to digest. I understand that. I get it. But it's like, well, at least take what you can. Like, if you at least take, I don't know, like one of the Lego bricks off the city and take that brick and work on that. And then if you're feeling up to the task, then come and grab another brick, right? If you can't take, a whole neighborhood in this Lego city, then at least take a brick. But it's like, no, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to run away and pretend like it's not happening. And I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like that's why I kind of sort of came into the judgmental space. Or and it honestly feels judgmental for me sometimes. But I'm the type of person, and I even talked to one of my friends about it a few years ago. Like, I don't like to hold judgment against people because I understand that life happens. And like I've said, we all have histories and reasons why we do the things that we do. And a lot of that, regardless of how valid it is, for whatever reason, it's all legitimate because it's how we've been conditioned and how we've been conditioning ourselves and how we've been conditioned by others, right? And so in my mind, like it always makes sense, right? Even if like I wouldn't personally do it, it makes sense. Um, and so like whenever comes time to being like critical, even when it comes to me like not wanting to have certain people in my own life because the energy just doesn't mesh. It's like I feel like I'm being judgmental if I'm like I don't want someone who's constantly negative, who only talks about people, who like has literally no joy in their life, and whenever I try to come into a bright moment they want to dim me. It's like I don't want to have somebody like that in my life, and then I start to feel judgmental because I don't want to have somebody like that in my life. And it's like that's part of the sort of the programming that I sort of had to work through, and that's a thing that a lot of people work through, especially those who would claim a title of empath or feel sort of empathic, right? Um, but that's what my friend she was like, you're not being judgmental. You're just like that's part of having healthy boundaries, number one, and you're just being like critical of like does this energy work with me or does it not? And there's no sort of like shame in that or whatever. But again, it's like it's that same thing, and that's why I'm like, for the people who would have claimed, for the people who claim to be so much in order to be so self-serving and just have like no compassion for what's actually happening right now, it was a little disappointing, right? Or a lot of disappointing, honestly. And then for the people who would just like, again, when it comes to astrology, and it's like, who would, it's like there's always opportunity. That's one of the things. It's like there's always opportunity. And even in an aspect that could be seen as bad, you can still find something positive in it, right? That it's the part of shifting perspective, because down is only down if up is up, right? You could always be on the up and up if you shift your perspective. When things start to go down, flip it. Hey, now they're going up. And it may not necessarily be that simple, but sometimes it kind of sort of is. Our perspective holds so much. And there are some perspectives that run counter to what to the destination that you want to sort of end up at. It's one of those things that's very counterintuitive, right? And that's another thing. And I feel like we've been so conditioned around certain things like words and the words that we speak. And I don't want to say that words in themselves don't have power, but what truly holds power is intention, right? What is your intention when you speak these words? And again, the words still have a flavor on that. It's not that they don't, but I feel like sometimes we get caught up on like breaking down the words and like whatever, and it's like we don't have the sort of same intentionality when it comes to other things. Um, anyway, I've rambled for like an hour. This is pretty much everything I wanted to say. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I got to the last point, um, but the last point, the thing that I'm working on now, is, I guess, asking me if I'm asking too much of me, right? And that's where I was going with the whole, like, in the past, sometimes I would use other people as distractions instead of me focusing on the things that I needed to focus on in my own life. I would seek out video games, or whenever one of my friends came to me with an issue, I would help them. And I enjoy helping people. It's something that I like doing. It isn't necessarily something that I advertise, because it seems like when you advertise it, people come and take advantage of you. But that's also sort of a paradigm that I've left behind because I've learned healthy boundaries. So, and whenever I feel those boundaries being like overstepped, then it's like, okay. But anyway, um, And it's like I guess I'm asking myself now if I've asked too much of myself, asked too much of myself because of what I would ask for some other people to do. But at the same time, it's my journey. It's the phase of my own test right now where I kind of sort of do it all. Kind of sort of, right? I can kind of sort of ration my energy to this is the piece for the collective and this is the piece for me. Honestly, right now in my personal life, it's a lot of like either me or the collective. um, I I feel like there's a few people that I've been talking to less, and it isn't necessarily anything personal. It's just like there's my me time, and then there's like the energy that I give to the collective and the things that I try to put in for. And one of one of the most interesting experiences for me as someone who used to be a lot more empathic when I was younger, like girl. But it's interesting now that there's so much of the world that I want to know. I think in the past it was like, oh, if it's bad news, I don't want to know because then I'll feel bad and I can't do anything. But it's like it also doesn't serve to have that sort of going on outside of the realm of my knowledge. And when I know about it, I can more consciously decide if I want that to continue even in the shadows of my reality, right? And again, it's just been interesting not necessarily feeling victim to a lot of stuff or feeling powerless about a lot of stuff. And in my mind, it's like it doesn't matter how powerful I am or how powerful I'm quote unquote not. My intention, my energy, I'm going to align it in the way that I want to align it. And I'm going to align it in the way that leads us to actually going forward. But then again, at the same time, it's like you can't violate someone's choice. And so it's like things kind of sort of have to get to that point where we choose something else. And when you're making a conscious choice, or a more conscious choice happens when you look at both sides of the situation, or you try to look at the situation in its entirety and not just sort of look at one side, right? It's like, well, that's that side, and that side is bad, so I'm just gonna do the opposite of whatever they say, whatever they're saying, because the opposite of whatever they're saying, doing the opposite of whatever they're saying, isn't always the correct or the more aligned choice, right? Sometimes you do something similar but for different reasons and with a different intention, right? If your intention is for me to be afraid, then you failed. But there's also another narrative with this exact same thing where I do it out of compassion and kindness and consideration for others. And it's that that compassion, kindness, and consideration for others. Like that's the reason why I make this choice. It's for no other reason. And again, it's been my experience that every time with the mask issue in particular, every time I've seen the mask issue, it protects other people from you more so than it protects you from other people. And in my mind, it's like, well, it's no reason why it's coming with so much sort of like contention, especially over here in America, where 9 times out of 10, and again, I'm like it's this interesting middle ground, this interesting point between seeing things as they are and choosing your reality. Because with my linear experience of the life that I've lived in my day-to-day life and what I've observed about a lot of other people all over this country is that people like if it doesn't benefit them, they don't care, right? It's like, oh, this mask protects other people. I don't care. And I can't breathe and it's unnatural. and blah blah blah. So I'm not gonna do it, right? And again, for me personally, when it came to the whole, because there were a few people that I heard talking about the fireworks in California. For some people, it was this like amazing, spectacular moment. For most of the people that I um, saw talk about it, but for me, I'm like, this is Americans being Americans, right? Did anybody expect anything different? Like, that's a legitimate question. Like, did anybody expect anything different than for people to not do what they were told and to go and do something anyway? Like, because at the end of the day, who does it serve? It serves the self, and that's what a lot of people over here are about. We don't want to wear a mask because it doesn't serve the self, right? We don't want to sort of like go into isolation or lockdown because it doesn't serve our own interests. We don't want to, not light fireworks because we want to light fireworks. We don't care what the consequences and repercussions of our actions are. We only care about what we want to do right now. And like again, like just looking at the whole thing, it's literally been it's been the whole thing, right? It's like, this is what I want to do, and I don't care what's happening. And in order to validate me and my not caring for what's happening, I will consciously, subconsciously, or otherwise, if there is an otherwise, choose to put my stock into the narrative 11111 just on the clock. Put my stock into the narrative that fortifies what I already want to do. And it's like, okay, works. It's like, you're that girl that I knew you were. You're doing this exactly how I knew you'd be doing it. And that's the thing about tests. If you're doing it the way you were expected and projected to do it, like, who's surprised? Where's the growth? And one of the most interesting things is that around this country, we've sort of always had this narrative of greatness. And somehow this country has become, for a lot of other countries in the world, this country has become like the country to look at, like the prime example of so many things. And it's like, well, if you look at what would make a good place to live, this country doesn't rank top in a lot of them, right? When it comes to healthcare and education and wealth distribution and stuff like that, like things that actually matter in your day to day life, and like the protections around you in your day to day life. It's like, unless you are of a certain specific class of people, it's like it's gonna look different for so many people. And now, like, there are so many people looking at us like, what kind of clownfoonery, like foolishness is going on in that country? And it's like, girl, this is the truth of America. Hello? No one is surprised. This is what it actually looks like, right? This is the pomp and the ego and everything, self, the land of me, right? It's like they say, the land of the free. This is the land of me. It's me, 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 me. And then I watched something, somebody shared it I came across it on Twitter yesterday. I think there were some people in South Korea, and then they were like, because it was like, Korea went down to single digit cases within a month or two or whatever, and the cases in America just continue to spike because, again, who cares over here? And they were talking about the masks, and this one girl was like, we do it because of, out of consideration for others, and for me it's a no-brainer, or for me it seems like the right thing to do, right? And like I've been saying, there are countries in the world where people already are considerate enough for other people, and again, it's part of the culture, so you could say, well, they have an excuse, but they're considerate enough for other people that, like, when people are wearing masks in those countries, it's because they may be feeling sick or unwell, and they don't want to get other people sick. It's like literally that simple. But I don't know. I've talked a lot. This is pretty much everything I wanted to say. I still don't think I quite finished the last point, but I think I did. Right? I don't think it's necessarily fair for me to ask for other people while they're going through something to be present for someone else, as if we're not all going through our own thing. And that's one of the things that I've really I've really been coming to terms with in a more personal level for some reason, on a more personal level for some reason. And it's interesting because I feel like when it comes to me at the end of the day, I guess I'm reevaluating my expectations of people right now. Is the easiest way to say that. I'm reevaluating my expectations for people. And I know that like I'm not an easy person to be friends with because it's like I am, but for some people I'm not an easy person to be friends with because I expect a certain level of decency and kindness and compassion for other people. Like I said, like if all we do is like sit around and make offensive jokes, I don't want you as a friend. If you can't have enough compassion or sympathy for somebody else where like you come in and you just like make their lives miserable and you don't have the self-awareness to know that like you kind of sort of do the same thing, like we can't be friends because at the end of the day it's more headache than it's worth, right? And like my mom's always like, I can't believe like you're such a hard person to be friends with. And I'm really friendly, like on a like an acquaintance level, like yeah, we can be friends. On an actual like friendship deep level, it's like I don't know, because it's I don't know, it's just who I am. But I'm learning to let the stick go and to loosen up a little bit and still not have to compromise the things that I kind of sort of stand for, because those are the standards I hold myself to. I hold myself to being a decent person, right? And so I want to be surrounded by decent people, and I don't think that's a lot to ask. But again, especially when you're dealing with Americans for whatever reason, and it could be anybody, but I only know Americans, or maybe it's only the people in my life. But it's like it seems like some people see like or treat decency like it's a huge task, and it's sort of unfair to ask for somebody else to be decent. And it's like, no. See, we just don't vibe. We just don't mesh. And anyway, I've talked a lot. These are my feelings. Don't. Right? The views expressed are completely unsullied mine, and as being the sole proprietor, owner, and runner of this channel, they do accurately, at this moment in time, because we all grow and change and evolve. At this moment in time, they reflect the views and opinions of this channel. And if you don't like it, you can leave. And I'm sure if you don't like it, you would have already left. So that part is a non whatever. But again, in my own personal life, I don't have time for it. I don't. Because like I gotta listen to it. If I make time for it, then I gotta listen to it. I gotta listen to people always talk about people, or make like generalized statements about people, or do other kind of stuff. It's just like, no, I'm not a fan. Sorry. Like, go find somebody that meshes with. It's just not my vibe. It's just not my vibe. If you can't be compassionate or think about somebody who ain't you for like at least 2.5 seconds, we probably won't work as friends. And that's fine. You know, maybe we can be acquaintances or associates, or we could just not be anything. Not everyone is gonna like, we're not gonna like everybody, and not everybody is gonna like us. And that's one of the things that I've held on to basically my whole life, right? There will be some people who just don't like me, and there will be some people that I just don't like. And sometimes I'll come across people who like me, but I don't like them. And if it ain't mutual, then it's not happening. So yeah, with that, I guess I've talked a lot, but I am, because it's part of my test right now to come into all that I'm coming into, to do all that I'm doing, and not lose my compassion, not lose my patience in the process. Um, and so, you know, I guess if I got to take the "that's just what people do" approach, then I'll continue to take the "that's just what people do" approach. And, it is what it is. All right, y'all. I've rambled enough. It's been a whole hour and 19 minutes and 24 seconds now. And I'm going to go. So have a good whatever whenever y'all see this. Um, excuse me, and feel free to. I don't want to say like exercise some critical thinking, but sometimes, like I've said, there's more than one way to get an answer, but sometimes you have to look at the approach. And sometimes the approach to that answer gives you more to work with than the actual answer itself. And that's one of the reasons why teachers ask you to show your work, especially when it comes to math or when it comes to anything. Like, explain how you got here. Because then, at least if you get it wrong, you can get some partial credit, right? And partial credit is better than no credit, right? Like a 32 F is better than a 0 F. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know where that laugh came from. But it is. I mean, I know that because, I've gotten plenty of zeros in the entire length. Honestly, the post like 7th grade length of my academic career, I've taken zeros. I just straight up take zeros, girl. I was like, I ain't feel like doing it, so I didn't do it. I'll take this 0, and I'll still end up with my B, my C, my whatever. As long as I'm passing, girl, that's all I care about. But now, it's not enough to just pass tests for me anymore, because I realize that not only am I asking for a lot, and not only do I want a lot, but I'm capable of a lot. And it no longer sits right with me not living up to my capabilities. So I'm going to continue to push myself, and I'm going to continue to strive for better, because I would be cheating myself out of an experience, and I would be cheating myself out of getting to not only know but also embody and live the fullness of who I am if, I sort of did the bare minimum. So we all do what we need to do for us. This is just my particular path in general, as, somebody with all the stuff in them that I got in me. So I'll catch y'all later. I am learning to loosen up, but at the same time, there are certain times when it serves us more to hold each other accountable and to highlight some of those things instead of just like holding it all within and knowing that someone is going to crash and burn because of like their mentality and how the world works, and waiting for that moment to happen. Um, so that's why I choose to speak now, even if I don't always talk directly to the people that I'm talking about. And again, it isn't always necessarily like, and that's one of the things that I really like. That's the space that I'm in on my new channel, right? It's that I'm more than addressing a specific person, I'm addressing a sort of like pattern of thought that runs through the collective. And I'm speaking to that pattern of thought that runs through the collective. And as I do that, it introduces another perspective within that space. So that when a thought would come to you that isn't necessarily yours, but in the realm of the collective of thoughts that you're just tapped into, then also it may come with another thought that's like, well, hey, like let me look at the other side of this, or let me also think about another perspective, and does that perspective give me any insight into sort of what's going on? Does that perspective resonate? And is it something that I can pull something from and build upon, or is it just like, not going to fly with me? And that's completely fine. So, yeah. And I've done the thing once where I reached out to somebody and I knew that I was kind of sort of putting a lot on that one person. And I even addressed that. I was like, I know I'm like putting a lot on you right now. And, I apologize for sort of making you the token person of everything that I'm experiencing with this collective of thought right now. And also, I thank you for being that person in my experience, not only to solicit it or not, to receive this, but to also play that part. Because now, again, like in my own experience, I get to look at how I look at things, right? And I don't always take the perspective of, what serves me the most, what's most convenient for me, and what's least inconvenient, and what requires the least amount of change in order for me to get where I want to go. Like, I'm not that type of person, right? I'm not that what's the easiest way? What's the quickest way? What's the quickest solution? Because honestly, like I said, if I'm not gonna do it, I'm not gonna do it, and I'll take the 0. But if I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna actually do it. And I'm not always the type of person that cuts corners. Surprisingly, I think when I enter into like my perfectionist sort of mode, I think it shocks a lot of people because I am pretty chill and like, it is what it is. It'll look like whatever it looks like. I'm not gonna necessarily care or worry too much about it. But if you get me in a space that like I actually care, then like be prepared. And I had a friend, that Libran friend that I went on a retreat with. We worked on a thing together, and he was like, if I do this with you, you're gonna take it seriously. And I said, okay. And I took it seriously, and me taking it seriously, he was not ready for the level of seriously I have to take stuff. Right? A lot of times I'm just like Pisces, go with the flow. I let it flow. I let it go. I keep on moving. But sometimes, you got to dig your little hoofs into the ground and let the Saturn come up out of you and rise from the bottom and the depths of your soul and be like, you know what, this ain't right. And we can do better. And we're going to do better because we're asking for better. How you asking for better, asking for more, and you ain't willing or ready or able to put in anything more. Right? And just like, I know I'm going to wrap this up, but I got a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings. Just like yesterday, I'm looking at this day at a time, or I was listening to people talking about the day at a time, like all of a sudden you just gonna wake up one day completely different. And it's like, no, right? Even if you could wake up in a completely different space tomorrow, it's always proportional to the amount of effort that you put in, right? So if you're not like in the space of, if you're not in the space of making completely different decisions on the fly, then we're going to have another big situation, Tom Hanks, right? Where it's like you're a grown man one day, you wake up, but you still have the mentality of a child. And now that serves him, because of the line of work he was doing. But in real life, it's like if you wake up grown tomorrow, you need to be doing grown people stuff because ain't nobody paying your bills. And ain't nobody waking you up, getting you ready for school in the morning. You know what I mean? And so I feel like that's one of the reasons why it doesn't necessarily work, because it's like on the physical, do things have the abilities to just like spontaneously shift? Like, yeah. Do I believe in miracles? Like, yeah. But at the same time, it's like it comes with it, like that work happens somewhere, right? It's like maybe you take a shortcut in the physical because you're doing so much spiritual work or mental or whatever, but it happens somewhere. And it's like the day of isn't, or the day before isn't the time to do it. Like, I don't know. In my mind, it's just a continuous process. And when you're getting ready, when you're constantly like ready and getting ready and getting ready and getting ready, then you're not taking all of the tower at once, right? You can spread a tower out over time and it gets easier. And when you actually show up, and that's another thing for me personally, ever since I've started like using my voice and showing up, I feel like life has gotten so much easier. Like I haven't felt like inundated by things and just like completely lost to the energy. And I feel like I don't necessarily go through these huge and drastic transitions. Like there was a moment around the new moon eclipses where I couldn't sleep for like a month before the first one, and then like a week before the second one. And after they passed, I got my sleep. So, but like that's the thing. It's like if it's like there are things that you need and there are things that you want. And Christmas comes around when Christmas comes around. So why not work on getting the things that you need before Christmas so that when Santa comes, you can get something that you actually want, right? Like when Santa comes, he can come and blow your mind because you've already worked on the things that you needed before the doorways and gateways and portals were open. And I guess we do have the Lion's Gate coming up, right? So before, like, whatever you use the Lion's Gate portal for, I would say for some of the stuff that you can start working on now, start doing it now so that when that portal opens, you can get, beyond what you're already capable of. That's just like the personal way I look at it. And honestly, it's like, it's not even the way I look at it, it's just how I live my life at this point. If something comes up, I address it. I think about it, I tackle it, and I keep moving, right? Because I don't know, I don't need to procrastinate and wait for something to turn into a whole issue, right? I don't know, like I said, I handle it as it comes. And when you handle it as it comes, it's not like I have 5 dishes or 5 sinks full worth of dishes piled up that now I gotta go clean. It's like I clean them as I use them, and it's never that big of a deal, right? Like, honestly, when I found out about cleaning dishes right after you use them, it blew my mind. And it's something so simple, but it's like, wow, like now I don't have to like wait until they pile up to go and do all of them. I can just do like a few as soon as I use them, and we're good, and I put them away. I don't know why it blew my mind the way it did, but it blew my mind, right? And yeah, so with that, I'm sure I could go on and on, but I won't. Happy Mayan New Year for y'all folks. Again, if y'all were waiting on the day to do all the stuff that you could have started doing, things are cyclic and they bleed into each other. They flow, right? We don't necessarily have the super jerky stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, stop. Like, that's not necessarily how it works. The energy is fluid, it's in transition. And I think that's one of the things that really holds us up and delays us the most. Whenever we feel a wheel of fortune turning, whenever we feel something shifting and happening and moving, it's like we kind of sort of stand still and wait for it to happen instead of continuing to do the things that we're doing that is making it happen, right? It's like you're not like on the road driving and then the GPS is like you are 2 miles from your destination, and then you just stop the car and wait for your destination to come to you. Like, not everything we have to pursue, but again, it's like if you're feeling something coming, it may be because you're on the trajectory to get it, and you being on the trajectory on the path to get it means that if like it could mean a few things, but one of the things that it could mean, because again, I don't like dealing in the realm of absolutes. I'm a Pisces. I got Neptune in me, and Jupiter, and also Saturn, interestingly enough, and some Venus. Venus is my ruling planet. I got a lot of Venusian energy in my chart, but Saturn is right there behind it. um, but yeah, it's like, you keep doing what you're doing to get you on that path. You don't stop. You don't turn around. You don't go back. Like, if you stop, girl, like, it's like the wheel of fortune is a runaway Ferris wheel, right? If you ain't on the Ferris wheel before it run away, you ain't on the wheel when it start moving, right? And then like, oh, the wheel is about to start moving. Let me like, it's like you're standing outside of the theme park going through the motions of being on an actual ride where you're buckling in, the bar is going down, and you put your hands over it, but you're still in your car in the parking lot outside, like ain't even been inside the theme park. But it's like in your car, you're going through all the motions expecting for the ride to start, and you're like, well, when does the ride start? And then the park shuts down because you were in your car the whole time waiting for the ride to start, and it's like, girl, like, you gotta get out of your car. Do you already have a ticket, or do you gotta buy a ticket at the entrance? Like, then you gotta make your way to the ride. Sometimes you gotta stand in line, and then you get on and you buckle in and you do everything. You don't, like, if you stop, it's gonna miss you, or you're gonna miss it. But again, these are all my personal feelings, right? It looks different for everybody. Maybe you'll just magically teleport onto the ride and you'll be fine, right? For some people, it does work like that. But I feel like for the people where it works like that, it's not anything that they sustain, right? It's not sustainable for them. And then it's like they get this miracle, they get this blessing, and then some of them end up in a position where they're worse off than what they were before, or they end up in the same position after a certain amount of time. And it's like, I don't know. All right, bye, y'all. The rest y'all can infer, I'm sure.